Hello, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Mirko. I'm very happy to have you here, and it's a wonderful day here in Melbourne. So we're just gonna uh, get the ball rolling. So um, if you're new to this podcast, I'm just glad you're here, and just please feel free to share this with any friends and family. I hope you got your cup of coffee ready. We got an amazing guest today. His name is Jason Scheltus, and he's the founder of Market Lane Coffee Roasters. So, as usual, you can just drop some questions on the bottom, and we're just gonna get the ball rolling. So I'm gonna send him an invite now, and he'll join us real soon. Hey, Jules. Puppy. Here we go. He's already in the.
Hi, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. Fantastic to see you. And thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time or so. And we're really grateful for it. So I'm really, really glad to see you and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. And first and foremost, how are you and your family and the Market Lane crew with this interesting time?
Yeah, we're okay. Family's good. I have a 3-year-old, and he spent a lot of time with his grandparents, so he's really missing them. But we're healthy and we're fine, so we can't complain. And the Market Lane crew is good. We were really nervous in March when the first shutdown happened, and we weren't sure what the impact was going to be. But I think we were really lucky in the way that we were able to keep all of our cafes open for the most part, and all of our staff employed almost 100%. We had a few full-timers that dropped down to 80% for a little while, but yeah, on the whole, we were very, very lucky, and yeah. So we, we,
That's fantastic.
we hear a lot from our friends overseas in Bolivia and Brazil. We're in close contact with them, and it's obviously just a different scale over there, and much more difficult. So we're thinking of them all the time.
Yeah. We're definitely going to go to that space real soon. I think it's times like this where we realize what we have and what we give for granted.
Yeah.
Simple as a roof and cup of water, and just
Yep.
just a good health system as well. Because some countries, especially origins, yeah, they're not as lucky as us. So we're definitely going to go there.
Yeah.
But just to give some context, and people are going to re-listen to this podcast, could you kindly tell us a bit more about your journey and how you started in coffee first?
Yeah, well, my start was in hospitality. So I was working in a couple of bars and cafes and restaurants, and I wasn't lost, but I wasn't quite sure of what I wanted to do with my life. So I was really interested in wine and cheese and coffee as well. And at the time, 2006, 2007, there wasn't a lot of information about where coffee came from, or how people decided what coffee they would choose for their blends, or even how it was roasted. So I thought that was really interesting, and I pursued it, fairly aggressively. I traveled quite a bit to places where I thought I would learn more about coffee, and one of the big influences turned out to be London, and working at a place called Monmouth Coffee. I worked there for 2 years. I worked, started, just making coffee, started selling beans on the bean bar, and then I worked in the roastery for quite a while as well. So it ended up being about 2 years, and I learned a lot about obviously roasting coffee and how they source coffee and marketing coffee in a way. But more than that, I really learned about why it's important to celebrate the stories of coffee producers and the people behind it, rather than just roasting coffee really the best way. So that was a really big inspiration. And after that, while I was working at Monmouth, I met Fleur Stud. And about a year after I met Fleur, we ended up back in Australia together at the same time. and she approached me with an idea of starting up a coffee roastery and a cafe called Market Lane Coffee. And she needed someone who had a bit of knowledge in roasting and could do a bit of the training and stuff like that. And I was really excited because we shared a lot of the same principles and ethics and ideas as well. So I was really excited to jump on board and jump right in. So I think I landed back in Australia in April, and we had our first meeting with the architect in June. So it was very, very short, and we got working straight away. So yeah, that was 2009. So about 10 years ago.
And speaking of values and principles, what sort of values and ideas were behind Market Lane? Because I think it's really important. It's something that I touch base often on this podcast is purpose and intention and, values rather than just chasing a coin.
Yep, definitely. I mean, on a practical sense, we wanted to offer something different than other coffee roasters and cafes in Australia. At the time, there was almost no filter coffee in Australia. Excuse me. There are a lot of cafes that would, maybe have an AeroPress or something, but it would, they would sell maybe 1 cup of it a day or something. There would be very little. And most roasters wouldn't tell you what was in the blend or what was being served on the day. And we really wanted to change that up and to show people that, you can buy some really great coffees with great transparency, and, you can make a business out of it. It doesn't have to be, buying coffee at $10 a kilo and selling it at 30. You can do it differently. So in a practical sense, that's sort of what we wanted to show. But from a values perspective, I mean, we both had a lot of influence from Monmouth in the way that we wanted to basically just take the stories of the people who grew the coffee and who produced it, and stories about their families and where they come from, and present that to customers in a way that was relatable. So we had to try and find ways to show that to people, to show that the coffee wasn't just a commodity. It wasn't just something, a bag you could take off a shelf. It was produced by someone and a family itself. So,
because I think often the element of people is just forgotten, isn't it? In many aspects, I think across the chain, we kind of have shifted. We put so much focus into the cup, into the whistles and bells, but people at origin that have the story, but also people across the chain, even baristas, but even looking after the people at the shop, have a building relationship, because going back to a common factor is that you mentioned, it's still hospitality, and hospitality by default is about people. And I think that we sort of forgotten about people. How do you see the people element in hospitality post-COVID, where people have experienced lockdowns and isolations away from people?
It's going to be really difficult. I mean, we're going to be. I think we're going to be living in a world where we're socially distancing until there's a vaccine, and we don't know whether that will happen. I think even if it does happen, this will leave a lot of scars and a lot of bad memories for people. And the way that we're going to have to make people feel comfortable is by doing it in a way that gives them a bit of space. So it's just not as intimate as it used to be. So I think it's going to be very different, very difficult. To be honest, I don't know how it's going to work, but I don't think it's going to be, plastic screens at the checkout, because that doesn't make people feel comfortable. It makes people scared and uneasy. So I'm not sure what the way that we're going to move forward, but.
And I think what I liked about you, what you just said about the stories of people, is just story and storytelling is really something that's been part of humans since thousands of years, gathering, around the fire and talking. And fun enough, coffee brings people together, brings people to the, next to the fire to tell stories. And how do you like to tell the stories from origin through your coffee and through Market Lane?
Well, I think it's about developing a connection where possible. So our best stories come from the producer themselves. When we've met them, we've sat down with them, we've talked to them, and we've really understood their situation from their perspective as well. I think that's really the the best way that we can do that. So our best connections come from, you know, the closest ones and the most personal ones. And I think that really rings through in our messaging and things like our postcards. They read a lot better if there's an honest and true story behind them. There are big challenges in the coffee industry, obviously, with making those personal connections, because in some cases it's just not possible. So places like Ethiopia, where there can be thousands of members of a washing station, and they have to pull everything together to sell it. You know, there's no other way of doing it. So in cases like that, it's very difficult to make that connection, or to present the coffee as coming from one producer or one family, because it's just not the case. You know, it's come from thousands. Yeah, but we try and meet every producer we represent. In places like Colombia and Guatemala, it's easier. Ethiopia is a little more difficult, but yeah, we try.
Yeah, of course, and I think also it's important that, you know, it's interesting because it can be done. It has to be done in the right way, like you guys do it, but can also be done in a non-spontaneous way that's sold more, and it's not genuine. And it's, you know, we've seen in specialty a few non-specialty claiming specialty, and I know specialty is a crazy word and just a word for the sake of the exercise, but how is for you important to kind of maintain that truth, you know, and that transparency when it comes to those stories, rather than just, you know, slap it on a piece of paper like a lot of people, not a lot, but a few people, because that would make the farmer angry themselves too. That's not fair.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think it's fine. Like, I know that there are lots of roasters who share the stories of coffee producers, but they haven't met them, or they haven't made a personal connection. They've chosen the coffee off a table because of its flavor profile and its price, and I think that's fine. You know, like that's a start. That's where we started, and I think that's still an honest way of representing and selling a coffee. So I don't think that the coffee industry has to be sort of like a one-to-one transaction of a roaster to a farmer.
No, yeah, sure.
But I think the issue is where people, you know, will put labels on bags claiming it's something when it's something entirely different. You know, and the word specialty coffee for me is pretty clearly defined as just being a coffee that's above 80 points, and the coffees that sit between 80 and 83 aren't, you know, to be honest, they're not really up to our standards, or, you know, common standards in Melbourne. So there's a lot of, it's just the terminology is aged sort of poorly, and we haven't come up with a better word for it. And we're not, at Market Lane, we're not really looking for a label or a word to, you know, to define our category of what sort of coffee we sell. We're happy for the coffee to, you know, to speak for itself, and to
Speak for itself.
you know, to I don't know, market itself, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's safe to say that you, amongst a few other cats in the Melbourne market, you know, definitely you guys are, you know, through, you know, between the pioneers of the Melbourne coffee scene, and we've seen, especially in the last few years, really that blooming and booming and just generating this buzz and this romanticized idea that opening a cafe is just you know, it's going to be an easy run. What's the secret to maintaining all these retail shops up to stand like you guys are doing? Because we see so many, you know, what I'm trying to say is that Melbourne has reached a point where there's so much going on, almost the oversaturation of the market, I would say.
It's hard. There's no secret. It's just difficult. So there's no secret. When we started at Crown Market, we really thought that we would only do the one shop. We really wanted to sell whole beans of coffee to people who came into the market, and we would have, you know, a nice range of 6 or 7 or 8 different coffees, and would be able to tell their stories. And but we quickly realized that the Melbourne market was really was really young, and there just weren't that many people who were brewing coffee at home. So we realized really quickly that we needed to change the way that we were working, and the way we decided to do it was to build a couple more cafes that would serve a lot of coffee drinks, and then along with those drinks, we would try and get people to brew coffee at home. So we did a lot of things. Like when we started out, we were doing free coffee cuppings every day. So we would do coffee cuppings 7 days a week for the public.
Wow.
And, each an hour long, and we would frequently get, 5, 6 people in each one. So it's just hard work, I think, to develop the market in a way that you want it to. It just takes a lot of time. I think the issue with the oversaturation is the price sacrifices that are made in terms of wholesale coffee. Like I think in terms of retail, it's great that we have a huge diversity. I think more so in wholesaling roasted coffee, the amount of competition that we have is actually pretty detrimental to the quality results that we have, and also to the coffee producers, because people are looking to really get sub $10 per kilo coffees into their blend, and then sell it at sub $30 and make a business out of it. And for the first couple of years for a new roaster, they're not expecting to make money, so they will keep discounting and keep throwing money into the cafe to try and build its volume and to try and build market share. So I think that's really the detrimental thing that's happened in the last 10 years in Melbourne, is that the value is sort of dropping out of roasted coffee because people are willing to make those sacrifices.
Yeah, and it's sad because I've witnessed some. When I was working for a coffee roaster for a couple of years, I witnessed some crazy prices, and the worst part is that I've seen as low as 16, 17, and the coffee was good. Like literally 16, 17, $18 a kilo, maybe with a machine, without going into details with who it was, who it wasn't. And when you taste the coffee, it's like, oh, it's actually not bad for for a big cafe in the city. That will do.
Yeah.
And I think it's just where someone in the interviews was saying, it's like, I think that Melbourne is special, especially like you said, the roasters, the specialty, let's call it specialty roasters. They were kind of they started this whole fight against each other. The real fight is against the commercial. Against is a negative word, because I think coffee is, we all a lot, like everyone is important. The guy who drinks V60 all the way to the lady who drinks a decaf frappuccino with matcha. I don't know what, it drinks at Starbucks. I think that's really sad. But like you said, the ones who get the most impact is the people who do it honestly here, because they can't compete. They walk in and they're like, whoa, hang on, you got offered this price. And B, but especially, is people at origin, because then they're forced to drive price even lower, which is, there's already not much money for them in specialty.
Yeah.
The other element, I'm not sure if you agree with this, is that I think that what I personally witness is a lot of, your example would be a couple, John and Jennifer, and they are both in accounting or banking, and they go to the local cafe on a Sunday and it's busy, and they're like, $18.50 for a smashed avocado. I would do it better. I would put alfalfa on top or something like that. And they start counting tables. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are killing it. And then we've seen people who never washed dishes, who never, even carry the plate, opening a lot of shops. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's just difficult. Like, it's like if I started a plumbing business and I struggle to, change a light bulb. Have you seen much of that, and how would you recommend people who want to get started in the industry to maybe take some baby steps?
Yeah, well, I think let's come back to the coffee price, because we'll come back to that in a second. But I think it's important. I've got a few things I want to say about that. But
I'm sure.
It's hard for me to suggest getting started in the industry without recommending that they do it in the way that I did it, but there are lots of different pathways. I was washing dishes in 2005, and by 2009, I had I started Market Lane with Flirt. So I think, things can change really quickly, and I think if you, I mean, for one, if you're lucky, but also if you put yourself in the right sort of frame in the right time, then it can work out for you as well. So I don't begrudge people seeing the cafe industry and thinking that it's a really nice lifestyle. I think it's really great. But I think the issue is that it's just not for everyone, and if you don't know what it is like to do service for 7 hours a day or 8 hours a day, then it can be a real shock, and people can grow resentful, and and it can hurt people along the way. So I think just getting a realistic idea of what you're in for is the best way to do it.
I like that. Yeah.
I mean, for example, Fleur was working for Disney and lastminute.com for many years, and she was in an office, and she switched to hospitality, basically on a dime, and she did it really well, and she loves it, and she's very good at it. So I think it's obviously possible. It's just you have to know what you're getting into.
100%. And going back on pricing, sorry, like you were saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, the pricing for wholesale roasted coffee is, I mean, it's challenging because you basically have to, instead of just retailing, you have to put another margin there. So you have to sell coffee at much lower than you would if you were just retailing it. And the challenge is that the amount of competition that there is in Melbourne is really driving the price of this roasted coffee down. And that goes back to importers of coffee into Australia, but it also goes back to producers. And at the moment, the price of coffee, the average price of coffee that people are getting is very, very low. And in a lot of cases, it's below cost of production. So people are farming coffee, they're working through the year. And at the end of the year, they're selling coffee for less than it costs them to produce. And that can seem really crazy to us. But for someone who doesn't know anything else, has inherited a farm in Bolivia, and all they know how to do is farm coffee, it's a really big issue because they might not realize that it's actually costing them money to produce coffee for us here in Melbourne. So I think it's a real issue, and it's going to come to a head and be very, very difficult very soon. So we have to work quickly, and we have to work really proactively to make sure we're paying fair prices for our grain coffee as roasters. And yeah,
and it's upsetting because some people want to do the right thing, some people don't. And what I've said in the past episode is that, for instance, in my country, which is not perfect, a lot of industry have a certain regulation around price. So they have a minimum and a maximum. So you can only play, in between that. And I think if there was a system, which, hey, I'm not a politician here, but if there was a system to kind of regulate at a wholesale price, then ultimately it would drive quality up, because at the table with 10 coffees blindfolded, people pick probably the one that they like the most if they were all the same price. I think that's quite natural on the personal preference. But there isn't a regulation. And like I said, I've seen anywhere from 16 to 42 for a blend. But then a regulation might, it's a bit, I don't know, maybe some people wouldn't like that.
No, but they don't like it because the status quo is making money, and that's what a lot of the industry is geared around. So places like Kenya have got regulations around minimum prices, and people still buy Kenyan coffee. It's not the world's biggest seller, but they have a minimum price, and some of it's driven by demand, but a lot of it's just you still have to cross that, and it's quite high. It's like $3 a pound or something. Like it's not nothing. So I think coffee producing countries can do it, and I think they can do it by setting a floor. And for Colombia, people will buy Colombian coffee even if it costs them a little bit more. Definitely.
Would you think that the same principle could work even in terms of wholesale? That's where I was kind of going, like where this is the floor, you can't charge less than that. which will be difficult.
Will still, I think people will still try and I think people will still buy low and sell high. So yeah, in terms of like drink prices is a good example. So if you walk around Melbourne, you won't find, I mean, except if you go to 7-Eleven, but if you go to cafes and things like that, all the coffee drink pricing will be about the same price. Like some will be a little bit lower, some will be a little bit higher, but you don't go and see a $6 latte and you don't go and see a $2.50 latte. And the reason for that is that it's really just market-based pricing. You know, they'll go and they'll look at what people are paying already, and they'll price it lower or higher or something like that. They're not going to really think about what it's actually costing them to make the latte and to sell it. So I think it's sort of similar with wholesale coffee pricing. At the moment, people just sort of look around at what people are selling their wholesale coffee for and then either go a little bit lower or a little bit higher or something like that. But they won't really work out what it's costing them to produce.
Yeah, no, it's a big topic. I think it's a topic that opens a lot of thinking, and I'll probably sit down and have a think about it later on again, because it's something that I'm sure that you face more, obviously, because you're more directly involved in the process, and and I appreciate what you guys are doing, obviously. Going back on something that you spoke earlier on, I'm reconnecting what Daniel Hobart told me recently last week on the episode, and he thinks that the fourth way of coffee is going to be home brewing, which I found quite interesting. I think it was a little bit provocation, because I think obviously with more people at home, most roasters' online sales have gone up. Do you see that as a potential new kind of wave? Like, have you seen more and more home brewing on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had like a lot of people, I'm sure, had a large uptick in our online retail sales, in our coffee club as well, and in our bricks and mortar stores, we saw a lot of people buying home brewing equipment. I think it's generally a really positive, because people will spend, you know, they'll treat themselves to something a little bit better than what they're used to. So they'll buy, you know, they'll buy a geisha coffee, or they'll buy an exotic processing method or something like that. You know, they'll spend a little bit more on their coffee. So I think it's a really good thing. It's a really positive thing. At the moment, people have a little bit more time, so they are experimenting. They're stepping out of their own comfort zone to try something new. And I think we'll retain a lot of these, converted bricks and mortar coffee drinkers to home coffee drinkers, because I think they'll realize that it's much easier than they think it is. It's obviously quite a lot cheaper than going to the cafe, and they'll probably enjoy the taste a bit more as well, because they've made it themselves, and they've sort of created something rather than just ordered something. So if there is a silver lining to all of this, it's that people are taking a bit more time to make coffee and doing it at home as well.
Yeah, and I really hope that would drive, the John and Joes and Jennies to appreciate more the craft, because they will realize, okay, they make my long black or my latte in such and such amount of time, and it took me this much time to make it myself, and they make it so much better. And hopefully to, start looking at coffee in a different way, start looking into coffee, start grabbing a book like the book that you wrote, or other amazing authors around the world, and start saying, hey, you know what, I'll stop going to this shop because I don't like the coffee anymore. Yep. So definitely. I hope that would drive that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it will. It doesn't take long for habits to form, and it doesn't take long for people to change their mind. Most people, when they have their first filter coffee, they're like, it's quite weak or something. But, if they have a second cup or a third cup, then, usually that's all it takes, and they'll be on board,
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other side, going on bit on consumerism and marketing, but, we will see a lot of cases where, when gatherings is still available, now coffee equipment is a lot of it's beautiful. You know, it's like it's presented, it's on the bench, it's on kitchen countertop. So it's like people were like, oh, what's that fancy kettle? Or what is that fancy scale or machine? So hopefully that will create even more of a, I want to get into it. Jason, we just hit the half mark of the interview, and thank you again for being here. We got the out of the box question that we ask everyone halfway. If you could, who would you like to have dinner with? And it can be anyone, doesn't have to be coffee, anyone.
Yeah. Oh, who would I like to have dinner with? Probably Albert Einstein, because he seems very approachable and funny. I think I'd like, hopefully he would, I don't know hopefully I could make him something he hasn't had before and we could have a good chuckle about it. But I don't know. He seems like
I like
it. Out of the box. Yeah.
I wonder what coffee he would have liked. He would have been an interesting guy to have in the roastery too, to maybe have a chat about processing and a bit of science behind it. And talking about approachable and accessible, I think in the past few years, also the reason why people were not homebrewing much is because coffee is a little bit scary. People nowadays are much more in their phones, so even in terms of socializing, some people are not comfortable talking, especially around things that they don't know, right? So it can look confronting if on the coffee bag it's written, you know, Pepsi with a hint of cherry and a sprinkle of cinnamon. And baristas, not all of them, but a few of them, they roll their eyes when you ask them about, you know, coffee.
Well, it's a bit of a contradiction that we have to be careful with. You know, are we craftspeople, or are we making something that's really accessible and easy that everyone can do? And it's a very difficult line to walk, because on one hand, you want to have tasting notes on the bag that say what the coffee actually tastes like, but then you also want to have coffee tasting notes on the bag that are accessible to everyone. You know, so if you drill down into the fine and sort of nerdy notes too far, you will alienate a lot of people who might be interested in buying that bag. So I think, you know, it's a challenge to make something that's appealing, that's obviously artisanal, but that's also really approachable and easy to get into. So it's a challenge we have a lot in our we have to think about a lot in our training, our staff training, and how we sell different coffees to people, or how we approach it, because it's a real trap just to say to someone, you know, this one is chocolatey and fruity, and this one is, you know, a darker roast. Which one would you like? Because it doesn't really convey the whole story about what the two coffees are, or what makes them special, or what they really taste like. So it is a very fine balance, and it's something that we have to be careful with.
Because the last thing that we want is, you know, have these beautiful coffees and people feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I can get it because, you know, I didn't get the right vibe from the barista or the person on the floor or the deal. So I think you're right. I think staff and conversations at the cafes are always extremely important to just have a relationship building with that person who's just starting to scratch the surface of coffee, and it could be as simple as a conversation.
Well, it's just, I think it just can be a bit disingenuous. You know, if you pick up, as a consumer, if you go into a place that you haven't been to before, and you pick up a beautiful like bag or a tin of coffee with gold lettering, and, you know, it's very expensive, and then someone comes up and says, this one's special because it's fruity. Like, okay, well, you know, is that the only special thing about it? Or, like, you know, what is really special about this coffee? So I think we have to be careful and you know, present special coffees as a very special thing, but also try and be accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when it comes to their orders and what they like and what they don't like, and just engaging with those conversations, absolutely.
Yeah.
And going back on sort of what you were talking about, which is pricing and origin related, it's safe to say that coffee is underpriced. That there's no ifs or buts. But yet, it's interesting how coffee is often compared to wine. What would it take for the coffee to kind of start getting a little bit closer to the wine industry, where people are happy to buy at $9, $10, $12, $15 glass of wine?
What would it take? Well, I think, firstly, I think they're quite different industries, right? So wine producers sell a finished product. So if you buy if you have a nice wine bar on Lygon Street and you buy a bottle of wine from the Yarra Valley, you're purchasing pretty much a finished product. All you need to do is get it to the right temperature, pop the top off, and pour it. So you've got to get the atmosphere right, but you don't have to get any of the construction right. With coffee, it's more difficult because coffee from origin needs to be processed locally. It needs to be processed and then processed a second time wherever it's made. So there are a couple more steps involved that mean that the price from the wine, the producer will have to be much lower than it is at the retail setting. So I think there will always be quite a large price differential between what's produced at origin as to what's sold in a cafe or in the shop, and I think that's fine. I think the problem is that now a cafe might make 5, 10, 15% profit. A roaster will also make 10, 15% profit, but the coffee producer will make nothing or lose money. That's where the real problem is. So I don't necessarily think that it's about increasing the price of a cup of coffee at the end, but it's about sort of balancing the profit margins of everybody along the chain and making sure that everyone can come along the journey and everyone can survive the journey. Because that's what we're really talking about is being able to serve coffee, to make coffee for people in 15 years' time. And at the moment, we're cannibalizing our producers. We're taking all the money away from them and we're putting it in our own pockets, and it's just going to destroy the industry. So I think just rebalancing it, and if you go back through and work out what the cost per pound increase would have on the cost of a latte here, it's not a big amount. So if a cafe decided that it wanted to support its coffee producers, they wouldn't need to put the price of their drinks up to $6 or $7. It might only be 50 cents, but it's important that it goes all the way back down to the coffee producer.
Yeah, but absolutely.
It's a complicated one. It's a bit tough.
It is, and it's a little bit upsetting because, you just remarked the fact that there is so much more steps in coffee. I used to be in the wine industry. Was one of my first jobs, and it's like, it's a little bit upsetting because you would assume that coffee would cost more based on the processes involved. Obviously, there's such a historical, strong cultural element of being a euro back home in Italy. It's
a complicated commodity. I mean, if you think about bananas, like bananas get grown and they obviously get treated a lot at the farm, but once they're picked, that's a banana. That's what you buy in the shop. But a coffee cherry, you have to grow the fruit, you have to process the seed, you have to do all these steps to the end to get a cup of coffee. So it's much more labor intensive. It's much more expensive to produce. But I absolutely think it's possible, and I absolutely think that we will be able to do it. But we need to work on it.
Yeah, and I think also what you just said, most people don't even know that. So we recently did a live tour at there was more like the processing part of the farm, not the actual trees, and in Indonesia. And a lot of people don't know that coffees, where the coffee beans come from. So I think even their education will make a lot of people go, oh, okay, now I appreciate it even more. So hopefully, like you said, it's complicated, but I think raising awareness even in this space and people who kind of listen again, it's important, because then it forces people to think, I'm going to go and sit on the couch for 10 minutes and think, okay, well, and start thinking like we all do. in terms of hospitality, because that's where you started, and you were sort of lost, you said, but then coffee kind of found you, which is amazing. Hospitality is far from perfect. If you could change one thing, what would that be?
In hospitality, well, right now I would change the working conditions for young people, and I would change the casualization of the workforce, because that's had real issues for decades, but also, I mean, recently we can see the results of the casualized workforce in the COVID outbreaks. It's untrained security guards, it's nurses, it's people who work in old people's homes who are, they're not supported. They're not supported to take sick leave. They're not supported to take, to work in just one place. They don't have the adequate training, and they don't have the adequate protection either. So, I would change that. I think that would really change the industry. It would make it more expensive for business, but I think it would be cheaper in the long run, and it would be worth it. That's probably one thing. Hospitality in terms of like service is pretty good in Melbourne. There's not much to complain about. So I don't know if there's too many like practical things I'd change.
No, I like that. I think if we become more expensive for certain businesses, but I think, for instance, what I like about, say, you guys is that you guys just, it's, you put all your, 80% or whatever percentage is coffee. You even just have one type of milk, right? Which is, it just narrow it down, just straight to the coffee, a little bit of pastries. Yeah. And I think for a long time, maybe due to high rents or maybe due to, the whole driven by manual competition, we see these cafes doing a bit of everything rather than specializing in one thing that they really know and comprehend, and they can really say, hey, I'm a donut pizza specialist. And I think a great example as well could be, a famous croissant brand where, for a long time they didn't have a coffee machine on site, and then, then lately, years later, they started making a little bit of coffee. So I think it's also important to kind of narrow down what you're good at. And, because when I used to talk to my customers looking for sites, everyone wants big. They want a big kitchen, they want a big place, but then that big, you got to fill it up. And that's where those casuals, like you said, come through versus, well, you can start a little bit smaller and see how things go. And you can go big. There's nothing wrong with big. It's just only the right operators can handle big.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think, I don't think everyone needs to be a specialist. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Hume Highway sandwich shop or, whatever.
No, absolutely, yeah.
But I think if you do want to be good at, if you do want to specialize in one thing, then you actually need to specialize in it. You can't just, I don't think you can say we're coffee specialists, but we do poached eggs, and we do, have a full service kitchen, and we do all these other things, because your focus is taken away from what your focus is supposed to be, because you're ordering eggs, or you're trying to work out your tea menu, or whatever it is. Like there's no way around it. And if your manager is worrying about that stuff, then they're not worrying about the coffee. I'm very fortunate that we've been able to build a business that's based solely on that. But we had to do it really consciously. It wasn't an accident.
Of course, yeah, and obviously, there is nothing wrong with any type of shops. I think where I was going is like sometimes because maybe they put too much on the menu or too much trying really to gather the most out of the shop.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong selling paintings off the wall, but basically it's like you said, it forces you to choose a cheaper employee rate on casual rate. And I like what you said. I think I was talking to Jessica Lambie, and she's very close to a lot of baristas and mental health, and a lot of baristas were made redundant because they were on those casual rates, and it's upsetting and sad to see this. So let's hope that changes, hopefully, with the new wave of the next normal.
Yeah, the next normal. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think the rates in Australia are okay.
Yeah.
I think they're okay. It's just that there's, you know, the casual workers need protection for especially sick pay, but also, you know, they need to be forced to take holidays, and you know, you have to have time off and stuff like that. So yeah,
It's very important. It's very
yeah,
important. Yeah, 100%. And another thing that you guys focus a lot is, which is another big buzzword, is sustainability. Because I think we give coffee for granted, but between the price crisis, like we mentioned, and climate change is at risk. What could it be, you know, the single most, maybe not the most, but a action that most individuals or a few individuals could do to help the whole ecosystem?
yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, in terms of people who own cafes or consumers.
I think, and consumers, because I think often we forget that individuals are in control and their actions dictate a lot of times the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the single biggest thing is to vote, because there are a lot of small changes that people can make, but they're dwarfed by the large policy changes that will have a real impact. So, for example, we could just ban coal-fired power. We could do that, but we don't have the right politicians in power to do that. You know, we have to vote to get the right politicians in power to do it. I think that's probably the most important thing to do. And then there are a lot of small, you know, things that do have an impact that you can do, like switching to renewable energy yourself, or driving less, or, you know, recycling properly. All these sort of things will definitely help. But yeah, it's the large thing. The large thing we need to change is our politicians and the framework where these businesses operate. And we just have to say, you know, you're not allowed to do it anymore.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think so. And it is a big topic. I think it's just it needs a space, even in the short conversations and things we talk just here on Instagram. It's just because a lot of people love to say it, but then they don't. We are in control, right? It's like, it's simple. If I live in mini ponds now, and it's like, if in mini ponds everybody boycotted the, you know, carrots that come in a plastic bag and Coles would be very quickly as shifting that and just say, hey, we don't, you know, they cut down not the supply, but they tell the supplier, don't put them in plastic bags, just put them in a box or whatever. So I think the individuals are really a key component to it, for sure.
They are, but I think the challenge with that is that there's going to be a portion of the population who either don't know, or they're not aware, or they don't care, you know. And if that portion makes up 35%, 40%, then it's going to allow, you know, Coles, for example, to say, well, we'll just keep selling to those people, and, you know, we'll do both. Like, we'll do, you know, we'll do the loose carrots, and we'll do the bags carrots, and, you know, it's so I think the personal choices that you make will have an impact, but I don't think that's going to make the wholesale change that we need, you know, right now. Yeah,
100%. And yeah, I think you hit the nail with education and knowledge, and which is so connected to that coffee conversation that we've had for the past few minutes. It's like, you know, until 9 years ago, I didn't know anything about coffee until I started my journey, and I think that would, you know, make people appreciate it more. And I think that's important.
I was thinking, do you want to do a tour of the roastery real quick? Or
sure,
Yeah,
100%. You can take it around. Yeah, we got about 11 minutes left before Instagram shuts it down, but he's with the mask. I feel like I should put it on too.
Well, I'm lucky at the moment. I'm up here by myself, so I haven't needed it. But if we go down there,
of course.
a few staff. So
yeah, this will be cool. Here we go.
Here we go. Yep. So I'll just give you this is Tashi. So this is sort of a big overview of the roastery.
Fantastic.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm going down. It's going to be a bit noisy, so maybe turn it down if you.
That's all right. It's a good sound.
Yeah.
Here's where the magic happens.
Yeah. So the magic happens. We got packing over here. We
Yeah.
split up everything for the shop. Yeah. All right. I'll get out of
Fantastic.
here. It's a bit noisy.
That's all right.
Yeah.
And obviously that retail component it's still important because it still keep people employed at Market Lane too, because you know you need packing coffee and you need to roast coffee, which is fantastic to hear that you've had a good positive response from the online world when it came to coffee too, brewing at home.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we've been very lucky. Our online shop was doing, it was obviously already doing pretty well. But we definitely had a very big spike when COVID hit. People, I think, like I said, experimenting with brewing coffee at home, and yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And look, Instagram is very cutthroat, and they only give you like 30 seconds countdown before they shut it all down. And I'm like,
Okay.
look, first, thank you. I'm very grateful for the chat that we've had. I think it will add value to people who will listen to this, once it's posted as a podcast as well, and rewatch it. So thank you. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy man with a 3-year-old, and Market Lane is, what is it? 11 years old.
11 years old, yeah.
On the last question, just before you leave us, just so people can get a bit more inspiration from you too, is ultimately what would you like to see in the coffee in the future, but also what's your coffee mission and what's next for you, even though it's unforeseeable now with the whole pandemic?
I think what's really motivating is seeing coffee producers do well, and for me that's shown in visiting them and seeing them spend their money. So, for example, I went to Colombia, and a lot of the producers that our exporter had been working with had done things like just painted their fences or updated their equipment, or their kids were going to school in fresh new clothes and things like that. And all of those things show that they have money to invest in their farm, but also money to spend on their family and in their life. And that was, for me, that was really motivating, and really hit home to say, like, yes, it's actually made a difference. So I think that's probably the thing that I'd like to see happen more in the future. Definitely.
I like that. And in terms of next, is what's next on your plate, on your planet?
I just get through the next week. I don't know. We built this new roastery at the start of the year, and that was a really big project for us. So I think, in the next few months, we're just going to work on getting it working efficiently and getting it going, and just focusing on the coffee, I guess.
And that's in Brunswick.
This is Brunswick East, yeah. So just off Lygon Street, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good spot. I miss Brunswick. If there's anything else, obviously that you want to leave us with, I think it's left about 5 minutes. But it's been so nice to talk to you face to face. It's almost like you were on the other side of the table, and hopefully next we can actually be at the table together, sharing a brew. And I really hope that. And thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you. It's been good. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There you have it, guys. It was very humbling and efficient. It was really a good workout for the morning. I think Jason had such an incredible, outstanding career and built, one of the institution coffees that we all know, especially in Melbourne and around the world and around Australia. And it was good to hear his story and what's behind the process and how important it is to have a value and a purpose or multiple attached to a brand and what you do. I think it's really important. So I hope you enjoyed this. It was a bit of a different time than usual. Usually we go live in the evening, but this was the only time that he could make it, and I really appreciate his time and conversation with us. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you have, feel free to share this as a story or take a screenshot or share the IGTV live. We want to grow this more and more. And tomorrow we have the girl from Origin. She's an amazing lady who will have an interesting conversation directly from Africa. So it'll be very interesting. So I'll post something on the stories next. But if not, hope you're well. Hope you're keeping safe. Big shout out to people who are still here. So we got David, Dax, Coffee Diaries, Vag, Sia, Manly Coffee, and Grinders. So hope you're well. Look after yourself, and I'll see you to the next live.